You hear that? That's the sound of inevitability. The inevitability of the end of proprietary storage systems that require special hardware and special formatting and special software. This is the future of enterprise, and often at a lower price point. The 45Drives Stornado. It's modern enterprise storage, an ideal building block for Ceph clusters and everything else. They sent one over. I got to take a look at it. I had some thoughts and feelings, a couple of criticisms, but this is a really interesting piece of hardware that is destined for a special project. So let's unpack what we're looking at. Alright, it's running right now. I'm going to shut it down so I can show you the inside. It's a 2U server. It's a almost completely standard 2U server. 45Drives has designed their own chassis and their own backplane, which we'll take a look at. Actually, a really innovative backplane. But yeah, look, standard high availability, high failover power supplies, 1350 watts. 2 of them at the back. We've also got a little red reset button, as well as a physical and mechanical power switch, and 2 bays for your operating system boot drives, your SATA drives. This platform is configured with the ME03CE0, but 45Drives gives you the flexibility when you're putting one of these together to configure if you want Intel, if you want AMD, if you want a single processor solution, if you want a dual processor solution. This is actually EPYC Sienna. This is the 64-core CPU, and it is currently configured with about 1 terabyte of memory. This is 2 DIMMs per channel. This is also the first time that I've taken a look at this socket from AMD. It's important to understand that there is something between the crazy high-end 12 memory channel EPYC 9000 series CPUs and everything else. And this is the 8000 series, and so this is also a Zen 4 CPU, but those have a very long embedded lifetime. And so this is a relatively high clock speed, 64 cores. This is designed as a virtualization platform. This is designed as a storage platform. This is designed with a lot of flexibility in mind. Because I talked to 45Drives a little ahead of time, they sent me the 64-core model because of what I have planned for a project. But even the 24-core or the 32-core model would be appropriate for this kind of a configuration. We also have 4 of these Broadcom tri-mode adapters. These are 8 PCIe lanes on the host side of things, but you have 16 lanes coming out the other side. And these lanes can be NVMe, they can be serial attached SCSI SAS, and they can be SATA. That's what we mean when we say tri-mode. So these 4 cards provide connectivity to the 16 bays at the front, hence Stornado F16. But part of the idea here from 45Drives is to not have any drive or storage bottlenecks. And with 16 bays, we can take this thing almost to 2 petabytes. With a U.3 from Solidigm, this is the 122 terabyte Solidigm drive that I've reviewed previously, the D5, P5336. Well, you need a U.3 version of this because the tri-mode adapters and the breakout is really designed for U.3, not U.2. Now, you can get NVMe drives that are both U.2 and U.3 compatible, but an older U.2 drive is not going to work on a U.3 backplane. So internally, our Gigabyte motherboard provides 4 slots of PCIe Gen 5 by 16 connectivity, and then the last 2 slots is either X16X0 or X8X8. So there's a little bit of shared connectivity here. But because these tri-mode adapters are 8 lanes, you can use the last slot. Just be aware that it is 8 PCIe Gen 4 lanes. They've got a 200 gigabit, well, dual 100 gigabit adapter in the slot here directly into the CPU. This would work fine with a ConnectX 5 or 6. I mean, you could get a Gen 5, 400 gigabit at PCIe Gen 5, and you could go nuts with that on this platform at PCIe Gen 5, which would be, just crazy amounts of fun, and probably also record setting. This configuration that is fully supported and tested and validated by 45Drives for Ceph, for Rocky Linux, for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and for Windows Server, can do 8 million IOPS read and over 10 million IOPS per second write. This is absurdly fast. And you heard it, it's not absurdly loud either. Most of the cooling is provided by 4 high RPM fans at the midboard, but they're not screechingly, deafeningly loud. Internally, we also have 2 unused Gen 5 MCIO headers. They're using one of the MCIO headers in SATA mode for their 2 internal SATA drives, which is fine. Now, it may look like there's a lot of room in here, but this is a single processor solution. This would work fine with a dual processor solution. The 64 core, as I said, is kind of a sweet spot. If you're running Rocky Linux or Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Red Hat is a fantastic virtualization platform. It has a web management GUI that's from Red Hat. 45Drives has their own plugins for that web management GUI that they've been supporting for years. They'll let you manage storage. But if we install some virtualization extensions, then this machine becomes an ideal virtualization host. Not only do we have a ton of room for memory capacity here, because 2 DIMMs per channel, we can use that for a file system cache and everything else, that's tons of room to run virtual machines. And I think 64 cores versus dual 64 core or an even higher end platform is the right call here, because I would use this as a building block for a cluster. I wouldn't buy just one of these. In fact, I think 45Drives should sell 3 packs. It's like, oh, you want to buy 3 and have your cluster ready to go and use that as your virtualization clustering platform. You could do that with OpenShift on the Red Hat side. You could also do that with Proxmox. Probably going to do that in a separate video using this as a platform. Another fun thing is that it does have dual built-in 10 gigabit, but with the dual built-in 100 gigabit, even if you don't have a 100 gigabit switch, if you have 3 of these, you can cross-connect the 100 gig NICs without a switch and build a cluster for Ceph and for virtual machines and be able to migrate between the nodes in the cluster at 100 gigabit. This is a thing that we've done before on this channel. We've even done it with Thunderbolt, but in this case, actually officially really supported on our QSFP or dual port QSFP networking here. So the sky's the limit in terms of flexibility. And because this platform is completely standard, this is a really elegant way to open up your infrastructure. You may be a refugee from certain virtualization platforms where proprietariness and everything and contract renewals bit you in the butt. Well, look at this. Look how amazing this is. And this is cheaper than a similarly configured system from Dell. There's a lot of customers out there that have Dell EMC. Wait, this looks like an Intel P4500. It is an Intel P4500 that has Dell's firmware on it. And that's the only difference. Dell has put their firmware on it, and they say, oh, you have to use our firmware with Dell EMC. This is a cash grab. This, from 45Drives, has exactly 0 of that. So there's a lot of customers out there that have a very deep memory that remember that kind of thing from their storage platform, as well as their virtualization platform. How would you like to move away from 2 proprietary things with one swoop? This sounds like an advertisement for 45Drives. It's really not. This is coming from someone who has been burned by the proprietariness, the rug pull, if you will. And I'm sure that I'm speaking to a lot of people in the audience that have experienced similar rug pulls from the enterprise. When the going gets tough and there's a little bit of a squeeze economically, guess who gets squeezed? The existing customers that don't have an easy way to move platforms. There is nothing about this platform that locks you into 45Drives. As such, 45Drives has to do good engineering or they're not going to have customers. And when they make mistakes, their customers are going to remember and look for things, and 45Drives has to make it right versus locking you in with something proprietary and holding you hostage as a customer, which is great. They've done away with the backplane. There is no backplane. Each board has an individual hot plug connection to each drive. This is better for airflow. The cables here connect horizontally, and this is a power distribution board. So there's 2 rails. There's 2 power delivery rails here, and the power conditioning stuff is on each board individually. So every drive has cleaner power. Every drive does not have shared power with its neighbor, and by not having a backplane, this is a lot easier from an airflow and cooling perspective. So 16 high-capacity drives, 122 terabyte solid-on drives. These have a 25-watt power envelope, so 25 times 16 is a lot of wattage at the front. 4 fans cooling it, needing to be able to cool it, and this gets it done. The only thing that I would really like to see is continued innovation from 45Drives. Things like dual fan here in case of a fan failure, because if you have a fan failure, it's not going to be amazing in terms of high performance drive cooling. And it's also going to be a little bit of a pain to get in here and replace the fans. There's one nut here that you can unscrew and pop it off to replace the fan. But there's enough room, I think, that they could do a front to back fan configuration, and I think they could probably also do a 3D printable sled or something to make the fans user serviceable and user replaceable. The other thing that I like about this design is that when we don't have the need for legacy drives, 45Drives has an incredibly straightforward path to move toward modern drives. NVMe is taking over the universe. SAS and SATA aren't really going to be a thing. NVMe with like one PCIe lane or two PCIe lanes might be a thing in the future as we get into PCIe 6 and 7 speeds and media and distribution and that sort of thing, and 128 to 192 PCIe lanes on new platforms that support PCIe 6 and 7. You're not going to need controllers. Controllers are going to be a thing of the past. Tri-mode adapters are convenient right now because it gives you compatibility with SATA, SAS, and NVMe, U.3 NVMe in this case. Processors have done some clever things in order to support SATA protocols on PCIe lanes directly from the processor. And sometimes you can get a breakout card that'll slot into a PCIe slot and will give you more SATA lanes. But not all the PCIe lanes on a CPU are designed to support SATA. Only a limited number of them are. I'm not sure how many off the top of my head on Sienna, but like for example, it's up to 16 lanes on the 9000 series, 9004, 9005. Epic, I think, is 16 SATA lanes. And so this all goes away, but 45Drives is already sitting pretty for that eventuality because you just connect that to a simpler card here that just takes your PCIe lanes and routes them to the front. We already see this in custom motherboard designs. So like when Gigabyte is doing chassis designs, instead of having all the PCIe lanes go to PCIe slots, they'll go to MCIO headers. And this motherboard has some 4-lane MCIO headers, but we also have 8-lane MCIO headers. Those are the most popular. And Gigabyte will have a motherboard that has some PCIe slots and also some MCIO headers that are routed to the front. 45Drives has opted not to use that, which I think is in your best interest again, because if in a few years you crazy IT administrators look at this and it's like, I need to replace this motherboard isn't available anymore, I'm going to get a similar compatible motherboard, or I'm going to do my own thing in 2U, these PCIe cards will just slot right in. Your network controller will slot right in. Whereas if they were using direct on motherboard MCIO connections to something at the midplane, then you would be in a tougher spot to find a motherboard that has the same number and type of MCIO connectors. In this case, there is one MCIO connector that's used for SATA, but most motherboards have at least one 4-lane MCIO, like most modern motherboards, have at least one MCIO header. And you still got standard SATA at the back of the backplane here. So if you're doing maintenance on this system, and something is different, you could just use a regular SATA patch cable to go to SATA in the motherboard if that's what you have, or SATA to MCIO, or SATA to, mini slim SAS, whatever crazy connector the motherboard designer has decided to use in 2026 or 28 or whatever when you're repurposing this chassis. So again, lots of good design choices for 45Drives that give you flexibility both in terms of maintenance and in terms of future compatibility, forward compatibility. I know that 45Drives in particular is very proud of their power rail system here, and it is clever and it is very interesting. It's a choice to put the power, because the drive doesn't just need 12 volts, it also needs 5 volts and there's some other control signals and things like that. And so they've put that on a PCB here for each one of their drives, for every connection at the front. And all 16 of these have 4 lanes, 4 PCIe lanes available to them through the controller. Now, can they run PCIe Gen 5? They cannot. That is not a capability of this controller, but they can run PCIe Gen 4. Our Solidigm 122 terabyte drive, it's PCIe Gen 4 anyway, because there just wasn't the power budget to do it in PCIe Gen 5. But this design is also flexibility. If you wanted to retroconvert the first, say, 4 slots here and take it directly into the PCIe slots, you can do that. You can swap some connections around here at the front. You will have to use a different breakout PCB cable, but for like our PCIe Gen 5 Solidigm drives, you could mount those in the front with a custom breakout and have a Gen 5 connection to one of the first 4 slots on the motherboard. And this is just a straight NVMe connection. But for right now, today in 2025, this is a thumping fast machine. You'd be hard pressed to get a faster machine, PCIe Gen 4, especially when it's configured with 8 to 12 high performance drives. You want 1.5 petabytes of online usable space with 122 terabyte NVMe. You can do it. It's sort of nuts. I think 45Drives on their website is shipping configurations that use up to 30 terabyte drives, and so they've qualified 16 times 30 terabytes, but 60 terabytes are available. And if you're on the I spend a lot of money list with Solidigm, the 122 terabyte drives are also available. And so I'm sure that something custom could be put together for you if you're interested in that, because almost 2 petabytes of raw capacity in 2U in a hot swap configuration at the front is sort of a big deal in 2025. So now let's talk special projects. I've got a special project planned for this chassis, and I don't know if it's going to stay in this configuration exactly or if we're going to customize this a little bit. I'm sort of eyeing this as a platform for a larger channel to provide high-speed video editing for multiple video editors that are using 25 gigabit workstations. I've got some Unify 100 gig switches. I reviewed this recently. The video on that might be out, or it might be coming out soon. I've been running a couple of these switches for a while, and I just picked up some more. This is 48 25 gig ports and 600 gig ports. This is Marvell's 100 gig chipset, and it's very, very good. This gives Broadcom a run for their money, and it is fantastic. Ubiquiti took a little bit to get the software exactly perfect. I found some bugs in the firmware. They fixed those late last year, earlier this year, and things have been really solid. Windows also supports 25 gig pretty well natively. You can get 2.5 gigabytes per second read and write as long as your storage and IOPS is fast enough and can keep up. And Stornado is fast enough and can keep up, no problem. So I can host a Stornado off of a switch like this and have a ton of 25 gigabit connectivity on a storage fabric, but use it for workstations and everything else. That's the plan. We'll see how it works out. But yeah. And before I do that, we're also going to try Proxmox on this natively. So we'll see how that works out. All right, once you've logged into Cockpit, that's the name of Red Hat's web GUI, and also on Rocky Linux. Rocky Linux is the open source version of Red Hat. There was some kerfuffle about Red Hat versus Rocky Linux, but 45Drives, Rocky Linux, they've got a lot of cool plugins and utilities for doing things with their platform. So it's not just the web GUI. Like if I run the terminal here, there's LSDev, which will show you, it's like, okay, I've got 8 devices populated, and it knows it's a Stornado, and it knows it's connected to a 9616i controller. There's a lot of cool little utilities that 45Drives have put together over the years in order to make administering these systems easier. You can also administer these as a unit. Like if you have more than one machine, that's a thing that Cockpit supports, and you just need to configure it, and 45Drives have done all of their homework in order to make that the quality of life from that experience really good. In this case, we're just going to go to disks or ZFS and configure a ZFS pool. 45Drives has a plugin, like a motherboard plugin, to show you the configuration. Now, I've been messing around with the PCIe configuration, don't read too much into that, but it shows the network card is installed, and then we've got our HBA controllers and the memory configuration here. So, and it shows that the connector there, the SDA and SDB for the boot volumes. So this is handy diagnostically. I also popped one of the DIMMs because I was curious. You know, DDR5 loves to be DDR5, and so sometimes you have to reseat memory, or you get a memory error, and it's just DDR5 being DDR5. The other nice thing is that they've plumbed in temperature monitoring. DDR5 temperature monitoring, or DDR5 error rates are tied to temperature, and these are Samsung DIMMs, which is fantastic. But the temperature there being 53°C, not even worried about it. I have seen some DIMMs start to have problems as low as 65 degrees C. These particular Samsung DIMMs don't start to have problems until 75°C. And by problems, I mean those just throttles. Like the memory will self-throttle silently when it exceeds its threshold temperature. And so monitoring that and adding that to your administration logs is important. Now, 45Drives has a lot of content that is amazing online about Ceph clusters and storage and virtual machines and ZFS pool and the whole 9 yards. Understand that the 2 SATA drives in the back, that's the boot volume, and that's where the operating system lives. And then I've added 8 terabyte NVMe to the system, so we have some room to experiment. Now you can configure the ZFS pool under the 45Drives GUI. You can create it from the command line. I'm used to creating it from the command line, so I'm going to create the pool from the command line. But, you know, that's just me. And now we can see that my storage pool tank is online, and it has 42 terabytes of free space. Now, Virtual Machines is a plugin in Cockpit, and so you can come to Virtual Machine and you can create a virtual machine, and we'll call it Test VM. And we can download an OS or install a URL, install an ISO from a URL, or do network booting or local ISO. There's a lot of options here. You can install Windows as a virtual machine, it's totally fine. We got 1.1 gigabytes of available memory. I could create a virtual machine with 16 gigabytes. Now, by default, the storage pool is your boot volume. You don't want that. We want to create a storage pool. We're going to call this tank. Technically, I want this to be a ZFS dataset, so I'm going to go to ZFS. We can see that our tank is online, and I can create a file system here called VMs. And now I can go to the virtual machines section and storage pools and create a storage pool, and that's the one we want to activate. We don't want to accidentally use the storage pool on the boot volume, or 256 gig SATA SSDs, so that's inactive. And there we go. We can install a virtual machine. And this thing has 128 thread capability, and you can oversubscribe that. So you could put a lot of virtual machines on this, especially with a terabyte of memory. Now keep in mind that when you've got an NVMe storage pool that's this big, 40 terabytes, a terabyte of memory doesn't really go all that far when you're using both file system caching with a heavy workload and virtual machines. A terabyte is the sweet spot, especially with 96 gig DIMMs. 96 gig DIMMs cost significantly less than 128 gigabyte DIMMs, but are not significantly less capacity. And so with 2 DIMMs per channel, this is a pretty great setup. And from here, the sky's the limit. There's a ton of great resources on the 45Drives website for configuration within the Cockpit ecosystem, the web GUI, the Red Hat ecosystem. A lot of Red Hat Enterprise Linux tutorials will apply, and this configuration will let you have absurdly high-speed network storage and absurdly high-speed virtual machines that are going to be able to run on this host, and a whole bunch of other stuff as we prep for future videos. So be on the lookout for those, and maybe check out some of the resources on 45Drives website for other kinds of things that you can set up on this. Ceph cluster, Proxmox, Red Hat, a lot of stuff. The next thing that we're going to get into is going to be the Proxmox setup, and we're going to reuse our ZFS pool that we've created here. So the virtual machine that I've installed and the ISOs that I've downloaded will carry over to Proxmox when we reinstall and set up for Proxmox. So, get subscribed, stay tuned for that video. So there we go. There's a quick tour of the Stornado F16, including Red Hat Enterprise Linux / Rocky Linux for its virtualization capabilities. I'm one of those level 1 if you have any questions or you want to see anything particular with this chassis before it goes into its special purpose project thing. I've only given you a hint. It's going to do some other stuff other than just be editing, but yeah, there's some other fun stuff. We are also going to install Proxmox on this next. So if you want to see a specific Proxmox configuration, let me know, at least before it gets to, running virtual machines and video editing stuff. All right, I'm Modulus Level 1. If you have any questions or anything you want to ask, hit me up in the forum. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there.